Hey friend, in this video we are talking about 5 chord progressions that unlock some of the foundations of music. Very often we'll talk about things like 5 chord progressions you need to know, which is helpful, but this is a list of 5 chord progressions that you probably already do know. But more importantly, what are some of the foundational musical takeaways we can learn from these very common chord progressions? Let's talk about it. So the first chord progression we're going to learn foundational theory from is the 1-4-5-1 chord progression. This, in the context of C major, would be a C major, F major, G major, C major chord progression. And a fantastic foundational musical concept that you can take away from this is just the power of a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. The most powerful basic chord transition we have in music is a 5 to a 1. 1 is the most resolved chord, and the 5 is the chord that most wants to be resolved. So a 5 chord essentially begs to go to a 1 chord. So this power of a 5 transitioning to a 1 is taken advantage of with this chord progression because the chord progression ends with that 5 to 1 chord transition. 1, 4, 5 really wants to go to 1, and it actually does go to 1. Also, something like going from your pre-chorus to your chorus, if you want your chorus to really hit, a very, very common thing to do is that 5 at the end of your pre-chorus, and then the chorus starts with the 1 because then it sounds like this is the main point of the song, which is usually the sound that you want at the beginning of your chorus. The next chord progression we're going to learn a foundational musical concept from is the most common of all, the 1-5-6-4 chord progression, which in the context of C major would be a C major, G major, A minor, F major chord progression. And a great takeaway from this chord progression is really just the value of really smooth chord transitions. This chord progression is super popular for a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that it is just a really smooth chord progression where every single chord change just feels right and very smooth. If you break it apart into pieces, a 1 to a 5, that's a super common chord change. A 5 to a 6 is another super common chord change. A 6 to a 4 is a super common chord change, and a 4 to a 1 is also a super common chord change. All of these are really, really, really smooth. Nothing sounds jarring, nothing sounds out of place. It's just a really smooth progression that never really surprises you in any way, which is not something we should go for in every song, certainly, but there is some value in considering what chord transitions smoothly to another, because sometimes that is the sound that we want, where we do want one chord to flow really nicely to another. The next chord progression we're going to learn from is the 1-6-5-4 chord progression, which in the context of C major would be C major, A minor, G major, F major. And a great takeaway from this chord progression is the incredible value of bass lines. And you may say, well, Joseph, wait a second, bass line, we're talking about chord progressions. And this is true, but this chord progression is one of the few chord progressions that has sort of a bass line built into it, where we don't need to use inversions, we don't have to do anything fancy. We can just do all root position chords, and it still gives us a form of bass line, a very common bass line, but we get this descending bass line. So the last 3 chords is a perfect descending bass line, and it just adds something to the music. In general, bass parts are super underrated. The most important part of your chord is almost always whatever is in the base of the chord, whatever the lowest note being played is. Just a little side tip, but the main takeaway from this is just the power of bass lines. Because yes, this is the most by the book sort of basic bass line, but even that adds something. There's a reason that this is a very common chord progression, because it has a pretty nice little bass line built right in. Maybe the most basic bass line possible, but it's still a nice little bass line that often does work well. The next chord progression we're going to learn from is the 1-4-6-5 chord progression, which in the context of C major would be C major, F major, A minor, G major. And a great takeaway from this chord progression is the incredible value there is in even subtle changes in chords. Because if we look at the middle 2 chords, we have a 4 chord going to a 6 chord, which is a very subtle difference because if we break it up by note, really, those two chords share 2 notes. They both have an A and a C, but an F major has an F, and an A major, instead of an F, has an E. This is the only difference between these chords, and yet they sound very different. In fact, we have the 4 chord, which is major, sounds a little lifted up. It sounds more happy, I suppose. And then we have the much less happy sounding minor chord, but it's just a difference of 1 note. The next progression we're going to learn from is the 5-6-4-1 chord progression, which in the context of C major would be G major, A minor, F major, C major. And the main takeaway from this, to me, is really just the value in delaying the gratification of resolve. All of the chord progressions we've talked about so far open with the 1 chord, the resolved chord. And then it goes on a journey, and very often it finds its way back to the 1 chord, even at the end of a 4 chord progression. We'll have something like 1, 4, 5, 1. So it's just almost constantly resolved. It goes off a little bit for a second, but for the most part, it starts resolved, it ends resolved. There's a lot of resolve. But a 5-6-4-1 chord progression starts unresolved, and even though that 5 chord wants to go to the 1 chord, as we learned earlier, not only do we not give that release, but we go to the minor 6 chord, and then we still don't go to the 1 chord. We go to the 4 chord. And then finally we go to that 1 chord. And this is only a 4 chord progression. So this isn't even delaying the gratification of resolve long at all. But you could apply this principle in a more extreme way. Like, for instance, maybe in your pre-chorus, you decide to delay the gratification of a 1 chord all the way until the chorus. This is a very common thing to do, by the way, to make your pre-chorus sound like a pre-chorus, is just don't use the 1 chord. So you could maybe have a 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 5 chord. That was the pre-chorus, and now the chorus finally gives you that one that you've wanted since almost the beginning, right? You just want that 1 chord, and then finally you get it. This is a very common tool in pre-choruses, as I said, because a pre-chorus should sound like it's not the destination, and a great way for something to not sound like it's the destination is have the tension of wanting to go to the 1 chord, but not actually giving that release. And then when you finally give that release at the beginning of your chorus with the 1 chord, it really makes the point. This is the main point of the song. This is the chorus. You've arrived. So there can be incredible power in delaying the gratification of that 1 chord and just using tension and allowing tension to sit and not feeling the compulsive need to resolve things right away. So don't be afraid to let your chord progressions sit in tension, or at the very least to not give the resolve that it may feel like they want. Tension is a great thing. Eventually, yes, you do want release, but don't shy away from tension, which is a super effective tool. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, something that will almost certainly be helpful to you as well is my free keys cheat sheet. It will break down what all the main chords and all the main notes you have in every key are. So I talked today a lot about C major. We did everything in C major. So it talks about what chords do you have in C major if you're writing a song in C major. Well, you have C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, you have A minor, and then you also have B diminished, but most of the time you won't use that one very much, but it can be used and be very effective. But if you want to write a song, and you usually want to write a song within a key, or at the very least a song section you want to be within a key, you want some tonal center of gravity. If you want to be able to do that in a really easy way, you want to write chord progressions made up of only chords within the key, and write melodies that are only made up of notes within the key. This cheat sheet will get you there immediately because it just gives you all the answers. So if that seems helpful to you, be sure to check it out. songwritertheory.com/keys, my free gift to you. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Talk to you in the next one.